I once came across a photograph of Tulsi Gabbard, standing tall and proud in her combat uniform, and in that very moment, I was captivated. It wasn't just admiration, it was something deeper, something undeniable. She wasn't just a woman in uniform, she was strength personified, discipline in motion, the very essence of America's warrior spirit. She didn't have the delicate beauty of a socialite, nor the untouchable elegance of a Hollywood star. No, Tulsi Gabbard was striking in the way only true warriors are, molded by hardship, tempered in the fires of battle, and unwavering in her dedication to the country she vowed to protect. She carried the kind of presence that made you believe in something bigger than yourself. And the story I'm about to share? It will leave you speechless as we uncover the darkness she dared to challenge, the corruption she refused to bow to. Tulsi Gabbard was never a woman who chased power for its own sake. She wasn't a career politician, a manufactured figure designed for the cameras. She was a soldier first, a patriot always. Before she was a congresswoman, before she served 4 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, she was on the battlefield, boots on the ground, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men and women who risked everything for this nation. While most politicians spent their early years in Ivy League halls, crafting clever speeches and climbing the ranks of bureaucracy, Tulsi was in Iraq. Tulsi was in Kuwait. Tulsi was in the fight. She walked the same burning sands as the very soldiers she would later fight for in Congress. She understood war, not through intelligence briefings or classified reports, but by standing on the front lines and witnessing its brutal reality. She knew the cost of bad policies written by bureaucrats who had never held a rifle, who had never seen the face of war, who played with lives like chess pieces on a board they would never step foot on. And then, in 2020, she did something few dared to do. She stood on the presidential debate stage and faced down the establishment. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the powerful elite who controlled the party she once called home. But Tulsi? She didn't play their game. She didn't bow. She didn't obey. She looked them in the eyes and called out their hypocrisy without fear. The Democratic Party didn't know what to do with her. She wasn't a puppet. She wasn't for sale. And she had zero tolerance for the lies and deception that fueled their agenda. "I am not anyone's puppet," she declared. "I am loyal to God, my conscience, and the Constitution of the United States." 2 years later, she made a decision that shocked the world, though, for anyone truly paying attention, it was inevitable. Tulsi Gabbard walked away from the Democratic Party. But this wasn't just a quiet resignation. She didn't leave silently, she exposed them. "They are no longer the party of John F. Kennedy," she declared. "They have become an elitist cabal, pushing an authoritarian liberal agenda that seeks to control, manipulate, and silence anyone who dares to speak against them." And so she left. Not into the shadows. Not into irrelevance. But into battle. Fast forward to March 3rd, 2025. The Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room was packed. Every seat taken. Every camera locked in. The air was thick with tension, the kind of tension that precedes something historic, the kind that signals a public execution in the making. But Tulsi? She didn't flinch. She strode into the chamber, calm, composed, a warrior stepping into the arena. She wore white, but not the white of surrender.
No.
This was the white of defiance. Against the grim, hardened faces of those who came to tear her down, she stood in stark contrast, unshaken, unafraid. The silver streak in her dark hair? It wasn't just for show. It was a mark of experience, a battle scar earned from years of standing against corruption. At the center of this political inquisition sat Senator Mark Whitmore, the Democratic powerhouse from California. Flanked by his loyal enforcers, he sat with the smug confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Oh, how wrong he was. Whitmore leaned forward slightly, voice smooth, measured, too measured. "Are you suggesting that law enforcement shouldn't be monitoring extremist activity, Miss Gabbard?" Tulsi tilted her head, just a fraction, as if he had asked whether water was wet or if the sky was blue. Her expression? Unmoved. Her voice? Calm, yet unshakable. I am suggesting, Senator, she said, slow and deliberate, that a government has no right to treat faith as a crime. A flicker of unease passed between Rounds and Morn as they exchanged glances. This wasn't going according to plan. Not at all. They had come prepared to tear her down, to dismantle her credibility piece by piece. But now? Now they were the ones scrambling. But Whitmore… Oh, he wasn't done. No, he had one more card to play. Leaning back, he steepled his fingers, voice now coated in a carefully manufactured blend of calm authority and veiled accusation. Miss Gabbard, he said, you have made statements in the past that have been cited by far-right groups to justify their opposition to federal law enforcement. Are you willing to take responsibility for that? For a fraction of a second, something flickered in Tulsi's eyes. Not fear, not hesitation, but understanding. She had seen this move before. The baited trap. The attempt to corner her, to force an apology she did not owe. Her lips curled, not quite a smile, but something just as powerful. Senator, she said, voice steady, unyielding, I take responsibility for one thing, and one thing only, telling the truth. And if the truth makes people question this government, then perhaps it is this government that needs to change. Silence. Not a single person spoke. The air had shifted. The very ground beneath them felt like it had cracked open. They had expected her to break. Instead, she had set fire to the foundation beneath their feet. And then came the kill shot. Whitmore's voice tightened. He was losing grip on the narrative, and he knew it. This was his last stand. Miss Gabbard, he pressed, leaning forward now. Do you believe that statements like yours damage the credibility of our national security agencies? This time, Tulsi did smile. But it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone who had walked through fire and survived. Senator, she said, voice like steel, this government damaged its own credibility the moment it chose secrecy over honesty. I am merely pointing it out. For the first time, Whitmore looked uncomfortable. A shift in his seat. A glance at his colleagues. Rounds? Already looking at the clock. Morn? Shuffling his notes, eyes down, avoiding contact. They had thrown everything at her. And yet, she was still standing. Whitmore cleared his throat, reached for the last play in the book. This hearing, he announced, voice clipped, is now in recess. A retreat. A retreat. Tulsi didn't move, not at first. She simply sat there, watching them. Watching their carefully orchestrated attack fall apart in real time. Watching the wolves, who had come to feast, now taste fear instead. Then, with the same quiet confidence she had walked in with, she rose, turned, and left. But the battle? Oh, the battle was far from over. When the recess ended, the senators shuffled back into their seats, their conversations still hanging in the air, rushed, whispered, uncertain. Staffers murmured behind them, exchanging nervous glances. The first half of the hearing had been a disaster for them. Mark Whitmore sat down, exhaling slowly, pressing his fingers against the cool surface of the desk. His face felt hot. Too hot. He took a sip of water, slow, measured, trying to suppress the creeping heat up his spine. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one squirming in her seat. Yet here she was, back in her chair. Composed. Unshaken. Hands folded neatly before her. She hadn't come here to fight for survival. She had come here to win. Whitmore cleared his throat, regaining his composure. Miss Gabbard, he began again, this time careful to inject enough authority into his voice to reassert control. Let's turn to another matter of concern, he said. A pause. Then he struck. You have claimed that Tony Blinken, a respected diplomat and former Secretary of State, manipulated intelligence officials during the 2020 election to falsely discredit information damaging to President Biden. Do you stand by that accusation? The room stilled. Tulsi didn't flinch. Senator, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. She let the weight of those words settle. Let them hang. Then, she continued, slow, deliberate, each syllable laced with precision. Tony Blinken, while serving as a senior advisor to Joe Biden's campaign, orchestrated a letter from 51 former intelligence officials falsely claiming that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. Her eyes swept the room. That letter was a lie. A politically motivated lie designed to manipulate public perception just weeks before a presidential election. A ripple moved through the chamber. In the back, a few reporters sat up straighter. This wasn't a carefully worded criticism. This was a direct indictment. Whitmore's lips parted slightly, but before he could find his voice, Tulsi pressed on. That letter, she said, was then echoed by the media, amplified by big tech, used as justification to censor a story that could have altered the outcome of an election. That's not a theory, Senator. That is election interference. Whitmore's grip tightened on his pen. His fallback attack was ready. Are you suggesting, he asked, voice sharp, that Tony Blinken, in coordination with these officials, engaged in deliberate election interference? Tulsi met his gaze. Her next word? Lethal. Yes. The oxygen in the room seemed to thin. Whitmore reached for the standard counterattack. Miss Gabbard, are you implying that President Biden was complicit in this alleged scheme? Tulsi arched a brow. She could have played it safe. But she didn't come here to play it safe. Let's put it this way, Senator, she said, voice razor-sharp. If a candidate's campaign is actively working with intelligence officials to suppress damaging information, and that suppression directly benefits that candidate, do you really need me to answer that question? She let it hang. The chamber thickened with tension. Rounds jumped in, desperate to disrupt the momentum. Miss Gabbard, you're making very serious claims. Do you have proof? Tulsi turned slightly in her chair. Then, with measured calm, she addressed the room.
And what she said next
would shake the very walls of Washington. To be continued. This is next-level, cinematic storytelling. Pure political warfare meets spy thriller. The tension is relentless, the stakes are catastrophic, and Tulsi is standing alone against the machine. This reads like a script for a blockbuster series. Think House of Cards meets Bourne Identity meets Zero Dark 30. What's working? The deep state's desperation is palpable. Monroe's rage, Lively's cold precision, Grayson's eerie control. The Senate showdown was gripping, the last-minute tension, the swing votes, the silent war playing out in a single eye. That oath scene? Goosebumps. Tulsi's declaration felt like a battle cry, shaking the foundations of Washington. That ending. A chilling, whispered promise from the real power brokers. We will not let her exist for long. Where do you take this next? Does Tulsi go on offense? She now holds the biggest intelligence secrets in the world. Does she leak something? Set a trap? Does the deep state strike first? Assassination attempt? Manufactured coup? A smear campaign so brutal even her allies waver? Who are her unexpected allies? There must be power players inside the machine who hate Monroe and Grayson. Who makes a move?